Did you do what I asked you to? And I said no, because what you asked me to do was illegal. It's not for the thin-skinned or for the faint of heart.
And the CEO is looking for this big neon sign that's kind of going, this is a risk.
They think risk is going to be something huge. It could be something very small.
Risk is in a bubble, in a bubble, in a bubble, in a bubble, in a bigger bubble.
I hate HR people. And then you're like, Libby, hey, Elizabeth, hey, I need help. Did you make that decision solely because of their gender? If AI replaces everybody, how do people live? I want you to call me up. I don't care where I am. My cell phone number is not going to change. Tell your mother that I used to work for her and everything that she said was true. And I can tell you where your problems are because you've hired the wrong person in the wrong job. All HR professionals aren't created equal.
Hello and welcome to Zed Talks. My name's Zed, Zoe, and if you already know the podcast, you'll know that I do unfiltered, unscripted, unedited. But today's a little different because I'm streaming from Bali and I am with a very special guest, and I want to introduce you to Elizabeth Gooden. And Elizabeth's going to tell you what Elizabeth does in a moment. And for those listeners and followers, click on the like, subscribe button. We'd love to hear what content resonates for you. Thanks so much for being here. Welcome, Elizabeth. And may I call you Elizabeth or Libby?
Either or works.
Okay. Well, I am so happy that you're in the couch with me today. And I'd love you to tell the audience a little bit about what you do and your company.
Sure. Of course, you already know, my name's Elizabeth Gooden. I have a consultancy called Lionheart HR. In Lionheart HR, we actually say we help organizations mitigate risk as it relates to people in leadership risk. So that's kind of my main focus, kind of my love work, if you could call it.
And Lionheart, the lion with the big heart.
Lionheart, okay, people always ask me, you know, where did I come up with the combination of Lionheart? Extremely personal. I love lions. I'm a Leo. Everything you read about Leos, that's me. I'm very courageous, but my team, people who've worked with me will tell you I have a big heart. So Lionheart come together. And that's where I am.
I happen to know that she's got a great heart, big heart.
Yeah, bigger than Texas.
I've got to know Libby over the last few days. We met each other in Texas last year through a good connection of ours called Sam Eaton and Mindability. We're both members of that community, and so now here we are, and Libby, so I'll refer to as Libby because I get the privilege, you don't yet, the privilege to work with Libby, so we're going to talk about risk, and I think the heart piece with risk in itself is so, for me, confronting. So let's get into risk. What does risk really mean?
Risk to me really means, in any organization, risk is the root cause of any type of operational, financial, or I'd say people-related failure. What I think is challenging about risk is that when you talk to CEOs or you talk to nonprofits, city managers, whatever you want to call it, wherever that top spot is, they will mostly tell you, we don't have any risk. Everything is all good. But what they don't realize is what risk looks like, how it manifests itself, if that makes sense. And risk manifests itself in a lot of different ways. It could be operational. Maybe you have infrastructure that's not working. It could be financial. Maybe you have some financial implications. It could just be people related.
Let's unpack that a bit, because I think that there's a couple of things that come to my mind, which is almost like risk. So if I put it as, there's good risk, measured, calculated risk, and then there's reckless risk, reputation, financial, the people, everything. What's the most, maybe you have areas of specialism or you have a focus, and maybe not, around the types of risk. How are they manifesting? So to unpack that a bit more around what you're seeing in the market today, has it changed in the last couple of years?
Yes, I would say when it comes to people, I'd say leadership risk, I would say it shows up in a couple of different ways. I think for organizations, it's not having enough bench strength. You don't have a pipeline. What are we going to do when this next level of leadership leaves? Do we have anybody? Are we developed anybody? And I think that's where a lot of organizations have some challenges there, if that makes sense. Risk also shows up as far as manager readiness. What I mean by manager readiness, Are they ready to really be on the ground and be operational with people? Usually, lots of times, managers, they understand their technical craft. You know, you're an engineer, you do all the engineering stuff, or you are a CPA, you know all the financial pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But the risk comes involved when you get into the people aspect of it. Just because you're a good CPA or a good engineer doesn't mean you understand and know how to deal with people. People are very unique individuals, and it can be very little things that happen. And most CEOs are looking for that big thing. They think risk is going to be something huge. It could be something very small. Risk could be one simple thing. Maybe there's an employee who's come up and maybe they have shared with you that maybe they have a medical situation and they need a certain accommodation. Or maybe they just tell you they have a medical situation. Let's say they don't use the word accommodation. Do your managers know what to do with that?
Mm.
What I see is most managers don't. They start getting into, they got X, Y, and Z, and they're doing all of that. And they miss the silent language of just the mere fact that this employee is brought up, I have, X, Y, and Z medical condition. Does your manager know that ADA might come into play? If you're in the federal space, do you know that Rehabilitation Act might come into space?
Right.
And that's where the risk is, because people think that the employee has to tell you all of it. They have to explicitly state, I'm a qualified individual under ADA and I'm looking for a reasonable accommodation. The law doesn't require that.
Right.
It requires your leaders to understand they've brought this up and what do you do with it. And then what I've found is most managers don't know what to do with it. And then it becomes a larger issue.
So going back to the risk doesn't need to be big. Do you, in my mind, I've got CEOs looking for big risk, right?
Mhm.
The CEO or the leader of the company or a company, and then the managers. It's like the managers maybe are more in the firing line when it comes to the small risks, the day-to-day things, and the CEO is looking for this big neon sign that's kind of going, this is a risk.
Yes.
So between these 2 points of like CEO seeing this, where do you feel like right now, what are you seeing in your work, or what are you feeling in industry? Because you work across broad sectors, but you've also got very specific experience in government. Could you give us a snapshot of what you see the CEOs looking for and what the managers, give us some examples of where and what you look for? So when you go into a company, these two different audiences, how are you evaluating and measuring their risk ratio? What do you look for?
Wow. That's loaded, Zoe.
It's a big question, I know.
I'll say this. I'm a speaker from this standpoint because, I'm in the HR space. So I would say what I see CEOs are the top people looking for. I think first and foremost, they don't always know what they're looking for as it relates to maybe their HR leader. They don't understand all the specifics, or they don't know how to find the right HR leader for their organization because there's different types. So I think that's one area. But what I think I probably see more so is this. I think lots of times CEOs want to be way more hands-on than what they need to. And they don't allow their HR partner or, whatever you want to call us, they don't allow us to help protect them, if that makes sense. And I think that's some of the biggest challenges. From the manager aspect, I just think it's managers not knowing what to do, when to escalate it to human resources. I believe sometimes managers get their CEOs involved too soon. And when you get your CEO involved in, I'd say, a people related issue too soon, it can really go astray. Because sometimes most CEOs are problem solving oriented. They want to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And they'll say, Johnny, get with your HR person and go tell them X. Or I'll tell you the worst thing they do. The manager would have had a conversation with their CEO, their leader, whoever, and then I'll get an email or something that says, Libby, Elizabeth, I've spoken to CEO X, Y, and Z, and they agree with me that we need to do Y.
Okay.
And my first thing is, kind of pump the brakes. Why are you doing this? First and foremost, if the advice is not, if it's ill-advised, you've started your documentation trail for a lawyer, because right then and there, you've got somebody else involved in it. The advice is inaccurate. And sometimes what happens and what I see in organizations, you might have an HR professional who doesn't have all the experience and they act on that.
Right. So they're being told what to do by somebody who doesn't really know what they're...
That's true.
Right.
And I tell people this, people I've worked for, and when I say this, I mean this respectfully, and I tell people I don't always do as I'm told. I know it laughs,
Me neither. Me
you know,
neither.
they're like, well, what do you mean by that? I'm going to listen to what you want, but I'm going to get you the desired outcome that's legal that we can
Right.
defend. And lots of times, you know, I'll never forget this. I was working somewhere and my leader was like, you know, Libby, I need you to go do X, Y, and Z. And I said, sure, no problem. A couple hours later, they said, you know, did you do what I asked you to? And I said, no. And, you know, they were kind of like, true story. I said, no. They were like, what do you mean? I said, because what you asked me to do is illegal. And they were like, oh, wait, Libby. I said, I know you didn't mean that. But
Yes.
you asked me, did I do what you told me to? And my answer is no. I went and did X because that's what we could defend. And to me, you need HR people who understand that, if that makes
Yes.
sense. You
Yes.
have to do more follow up. You have to ask more questions. And that's, to me, is where the risk is. So even that situation that I told you, if you have someone who's ill-advised or who's not trained, they're going to go and execute that. And HR people, as I tell everybody, it's a hard job. I love it, but it's a hard job. It's not
It is.
for the thin-skinned or for the faint of heart. You have to have enough courage to be able to tell that person, no, that's not what we're going to do. But most importantly, we need to explain why. And that's what
Yes.
I did in this situation. I said, look, I hear you, but we can't do X. You know, we need to do this.
Yeah, it's a delicate balance, isn't it? And I always think prevention is cure.
Mhm.
That's I always think that acting after the event is always, it can be, some of this stuff can be really avoided, and
It's
it comes
true.
down to education, reiteration of education. Do you see many organisations that are very hot on doing that prevention, or is it always very reactive because there's money involved, or if we could, because of what reasons?
I think some of it, I'd say some of the great organizations are being preventative or trying to do that, but I think that most of them are being reactionary because they don't understand it themselves.
Yeah.
They don't think about the one little small scenario that can be a bigger issue. They don't see it that way, maybe because they haven't experienced it or they don't understand all the ins and outs. And usually what happens, it's too far gone by the time that I see a lot of leaders really want to respond. Maybe it's 3, 4 months have gone by and they haven't taken the appropriate steps. They haven't done the documentation. They haven't done the proper, you know, resolution or identifying what the issue is. And that's when it becomes bigger. And that's what they don't tend to grasp.
Yeah, yeah, that's certainly, and I haven't been in frontline HR for, I mean, I do have a fractional client, so I do some, but it's very light work now. And I'm often still grappling 25 years into my HR knowledge that people just are all shades of all colours. They do not do what they're told. Um, and that we're not robots. People have to, you know, intuition. I hear people say a lot when they think they're a well-versed manager. You know, I acted intuitively, and I'm like, that's a bit of a dangerous game when it comes to kind of some
Mm.
risk, right? And I wonder, what's your experience been? Because you've got the same longer tenure than me in
Mhm.
HR. Like, where do you, where should education go, or what should we be doing? And I also think that we have our hands tied a lot. We're not always able to do the things that we would like because the organisation, whether there's funds around it that are
Mhm.
required, whether the CEO wants to make a decision or whatever. Sometimes our hands are tied. If we had carte blanche and we could do anything, what do you think the ideal state would be to help educate, to help that learning stick that managers want to follow?
I would say this. I think that we need to make sure managers and leaders, we need to equip them with a skill set, whatever you call it. In some organizations, I call it a boot camp, or it's manager readiness. I think there's certain things that, and they're people related things that you just have to educate people on. Um, I find this, most leaders, they don't set out to fail. They just don't know.
Yeah.
And what I find, you know, I was talking to this gentleman a couple days ago, and what did he do? He had come up with a new standard, something new he wanted his team to do. And he approached it from the standpoint of, hey, I'd like for you guys to go through this training. But he told them it was strictly voluntary.
Mhm.
And one of the people came back to him and said, well, I don't have time to do that right now.
Very common, by the way.
And I said to him, I said, I wish you would have come to me ahead of time. You're giving them options. You have basically said to me, you're trying to equip your team for this new standard. You're trying to elevate what they do, but you told them it was voluntary.
Mm.
It's not voluntary.
Yeah.
You need to explain, for us to achieve X, Y, and Z goal, we are going to be required to go through this training. You have until, I don't know, 16, 12 months, whatever the time frame is. It's a job requirement.
Mm.
Excuse me. And he was like, Libby, I didn't think about that. I said, yes, we are making too many things optional. That's not optional.
You've just triggered something in me in a very good way, which is, I think, and you might agree or disagree or otherwise, I'm curious what the audience thinks, and of course you. I think that lots of HR people underestimate. They know a certain thing, and that just is not imparted. It's normal for a HR practitioner. It's kind of almost like it's common sense to do this, but it's not common sense for managers.
Correct, because they don't do it every day.
Because they don't do it every day.
But that's my point. They don't do it every day.
Yeah.
So when you deliver a training, it can't be all in the jargon. You don't want to talk to a manager. Maybe you're doing training on Family Medical Leave Act. They don't care about all the different aspects of the serious health condition and what it looks like. You need to make it come alive. So I try to say, this is how this shows up in your organization. Let's speak of the Americans with Disabilities Act. An employee mentioning something about a medical condition, that's all you need to know. They don't need to say anything else.
Right.
I want you to know the triggers. This is when you call us.
Right.
Get us involved, and all HR people will tell you this. We want to be involved early.
Yes.
Because if you get us in early, we can help mitigate it. But usually what happens, they've done all of this, they come back and, you got a little brush fire. They're like, Libby, what do I do? And I'm like, well, what happened? And how long has this been going on? Oh, well, Libby's only been going on for, a month or two. I'm like, why didn't you tell me, then? But that's all we have to help them with, because I don't want them to do my job. I'm not trying to develop them to be an HR person.
Yes.
I want you to know enough. This is the sign. It's like the Batman signal, in Gotham City.
Yes.
You see Batman, that little symbol up there.
Yeah.
I want there to be a vision of, hey, here's the HR symbol. We need help because I saw X, and let us come in and help steer you.
Yes. Yeah. I think you've just also said something else which is so important. We're not trying to make managers HR people. They just need to know enough. And that's a tender balance in different organisations and different management maturity. But it's knowing these signs and like the levels of when this happens, this is when we need to be involved.
That's true, because most managers, and this drives me crazy, it happens to me, you're somewhere and people say, what do you do? Oh, I do human resources. And they're like, oh, I hate HR people. And I tell everybody this, you hate HR people until
you need them.
Until you got your thing in a sling. And then you're like, Libby, hey, Elizabeth, hey, I need help.
Yeah.
We're here, and that's why I tell people, and this may not always agree with a lot of HR people. Sometimes I think my views might be a little bit different. We mitigate risk. I'm not here to stop you from doing everything, because, I'm not trying to beat you up with 50 million policies. I want you to understand why I don't want you to do it. And I think if I explain to you why, you'll understand. And I think that's what sometimes changes it. They just need to understand why.
Isn't it? So in my world, my pea-sized brain, I kind of feel like if I de-risk things, it enables them more. If I can remove the blocks and boundaries that will create problems on the road, then I'm an enabler. It's like I've always faced this challenge around being hated in HR. I mean, I'm going to say it, fucking winds me up when I hear people say, even in jest, oh, HR, like, I'm just like, I'm a person too, and I'm an employee too. And until you need me, I'm no one to you. But when you need me, you sure need me, because something has become a problem and no one else knows how to fix it that has the right skill set. So I got off my soapbox about that. But it really, it just irritates me so much that I don't go, oh, there's a finance person, you know, or there's a strategy person, or there's a commercial person in the room. I don't like them, because I'm like, that's just bullshit. So I feel if you're a manager, don't hate on HR.
This is the best way to look at it. Human resources, when you're an agency, an organization, you know, our closest partner is finance.
Yeah.
Um, I know there's men out there who do finance, but I'm just going to call it, you know, usually sometimes it might be a woman. That's my sister or my brother.
Yes.
And this is what I tell people. I'm in human resources. When you start bringing up money, or if there's something involving money, maybe you want to reclassify a position, or maybe we're looking to hire this position and, you know, I need to readjust the anticipated hiring range. It's money. I go to my finance partner and I say, you know, hey, you know, Samantha, you know, Jim is looking to get a chemical engineer. How much more money do we need? Because we think that we can't get X. I go to them because it's money related. That's their job.
Yeah.
So the same way you wouldn't deal with a financial issue without going to your finance partner,
Yeah.
you don't deal with a people issue without coming to your HR partner,
Exactly.
because we know human
Exactly.
resources. Does that make sense?
Exactly.
If I want a doctor and, you know, I need a prescription for whatever, you're not going to come to me. I need to go to a doctor, or I need to go to a nurse practitioner. HR should be seen in the same light. You got a people problem, come to us because we're going to help you do that. Don't ask me about the dimensions of building a bridge. Don't ask me, I mean, an audit, only if it's related to the HR piece. You know what I mean? Don't get me involved in that. But when it's a people issue, I want you to come to me. And that's where I think we have to elevate, you know, human resources. I think the other thing for human resources to be effective, and I would tell all HR people this, you've got to know that line of business.
Yeah.
I can tell you situations. I have surprised fire chiefs. I have surprised city managers when, you know, we're talking about fire and I tell them the national standard, you know, oh, national standard, you need 4 people on an apparatus or an engine. And they kind of look at me. It's my job to know. You can get by with 3. How many do you need on a medic? When they see that you understand their line of business,
Yes.
they're like, okay, wow, I get it. And we need to understand their language, because when you come to them and you understand that language, they're like, oh, wow, they get it.
Yeah, meeting them where they need to be met. I think that that's always a really good point. And for HR practitioners that are listening to this, that sit with HR every day, all day, is not the right approach, I wouldn't say. And I'm very bold about this. HR needs to be in the business. They are the business. They're not separate to the business. And in my world, there's no HR strategy that is separate to a strategy. It's a people component within that enables that objective to come to life, right? So, and one thing that, I don't know if you've ever had this, Libby, but somebody said to me once, if I have an emergency, I'll call you. And I said, you'll call 911. If it's fire, ambulance, police, that's not me. I can do many things, but I cannot put out a fire, a literal fire. I can't save somebody from road crashes. I can't I can be there to support and I can be there to help. But you know, I'm not for everything. And I think that's also a very symbolic thing that happens in an organization, that people don't know what HR do. They don't know what they actually are there to do. And it's a complete miscommunication.
But I think that's because sometimes I don't think human resources does a really good job of always explaining what we do. And too many people relegate themselves to just to a different, you know, back in the day, I'm gonna date myself, back in the day, that's what a lot of HR people were talking about. You know, I want to come to the table. I want to come to the table. And my prospect was, I am the table.
Right.
You need me.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate. I've worked for some great leaders who, when there was things going on, they invited me in. Hey, come and sit down. Let's hear what's going on. But I think we have to bring that skill set for that. There's a place and time for everything, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
But I don't mind the fire, Zoe. I like a good fire.
Yeah, you love a good fire.
Oh, I love a good fire.
So Libby's the one that loves the.
I love a good. I love a good challenge. And as I was telling somebody the other day, you know human resources when you get a phone call. It's 2:30 in the morning, and somebody calls you on the phone, and you have to be answer HR related questions. And I said, to me, that's my barometer of greatness. If you can wake up in the middle of the night and somebody's like, Libby, this, and this is going on, what do I do? And you have to wake up out of your sleep and be like, okay, hold up, boom, 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 you need to do X. That's been my existence. And I think that's what you shows that level of this. You need to be able to pivot. You need to be able to move quickly and understand the situation. And I think sometimes as HR, as one city manager told me one time, we were doing something and I said, well, can I think about it? And she said, no, I want an answer now. And from there, that's what I work on. Let me give you an answer now. Sometimes you can have time to get more facts, but
Yeah, well, talking to speed, let's switch lanes a little bit because I'm curious to hear. And we may not have the answers, right? Because I don't have answers. So I'm just curious. Now we've got another risk on the table, AI. So for those of you that don't know, that's kind of what I specialize in now. So I'm from an HR background, but I specialize in intelligent systems that help HR. You don't need to be an AI expert to see and know that these changes of AI is massively impacting workforces. Is that touching you yet?
it is. I think what I see, it sometimes gives me pause, is to hear organizations who say, well, because of AI, we only need so many people. I love technology as much as the next
Yes.
person. I love AI, but I think it has its place.
Yep.
Um, I think sometimes there's too many nuances, and you can't train everybody for every nuance, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes employees a little bit anxious. I think I've read recently that I can't remember what generation it is, but there's been some commencement speakers where the commencement speakers are bringing up AI and they're getting booed because not everybody wants to be that connected to technology looking at a screen.
Mm.
I think that to use AI intelligently, if you will, it's a delicate mix, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I think AI needs to be normalised. I think we're not at the point yet because we've got adoption all over the place. So recent surveys suggest that we have come very far in 1 year. And I'm not talking about a nominal data set. So we had 277 in 2025 voices in the survey. This year it's 366. Put those cumulatively, we've got a pretty good data set to work from. Is that representative of the type of community that we've got globally? Of course not, but it's a starting point. But what we have seen in this from 25 to 26 is this exponential adoption, individual more than organisation. So what suggests to me is that individually we're all using it for our lives and work in multiple different ways, different tools, and that experimentation and exploration is really still very key in developing tools. Education is not brilliant around it, is not so much formal education, because I'll go back to when PowerPoint, Excel and Word, Microsoft tools were put in place. I mean, I'm showing my age now, but if you think about when you did a specific task in your job, I didn't need to learn Excel basic, intermediate, advanced. I probably knew one feature in advanced more than I did basic because it was the one thing that was required in my job that I just needed to learn. That's what AI can't be that specific about. So we could, at the moment, it's like finding the right education tools that are going to move the needle for an organisation. Organisations are showing that they're not yet mature, and they wouldn't be because it's too new, because the risk is so high of getting it so wrong. You know, taking people out of roles, now we'll have some reversal. We'll have to unpack to redo. That's what's going to happen.
Yes, I believe we're going to go too far, and then you're going to need
Yep.
people back. But at the end of the day, what do you do with all the people? If AI replaces everybody, how do people live? Everybody's not going to be Elon Musk and's got $1 trillion. You know what I mean? So I just say this. I just think you use it, responsibly. What I hear people using it for, I'm also a certified federal EO investigator. You hear people who are using it to, like, the report of investigation, if you will. Why would you do that? There's confidential information out there. It's for discovery. I just think you have to be responsible about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I might use it for if I need to soften something I want to say to somebody, but I'm not using it as my engine to think, if you will. I would never take artificial intelligence and say, I have this employee relations issue. The employee said X, Y, and Z. What do I do? And people say, why not? Something that you always say, Zoe, you say, AI is only as good as the prompts.
Absolutely.
As an HR person, when somebody brings me a situation, I say I might have 50 million questions for you. My questions are going to be predicated on that situation. And I know you would say AI could do that, but I just think it's different. You want that human aspect of it.
I certainly feel that when it comes to wisdom, so I think that there is laziness that comes with AI. I think that we have to be really careful because critical thinking can be taken out of the picture. And actually, that's one of the things that, given a generation X or Y, millennials, we are not digital natives, right? That's a fact. We still know how to do sums without a calculator. We still need to be able to, we knew what it was like before we had mobile technology. So we understand what people might be perceived as old school or back in the day. We can pivot between if you took my laptop and phone away, it would slow me down, no doubt, no doubt. But if somebody's sitting in front of me, I would not need to consult with anything or anyone. Maybe if there's a legal act that I need to be more astute with, but I don't rely on that. And no one should be relying on it to tell us that information. That's why we've been in this game a long time. That's why we're experts in this field.
But that's what it does. And even way before AI, critical thinking skills were going way down. I mean, I found that sometimes when, you're training or developing new HR leaders, I found that to be critical thinking skills or deductive reasoning skills. I'm like, can you figure that out? Or they're very linear. You know, that's one thing I try to avoid when I hire HR professionals. I need you to understand that if somebody brings you a situation starts at C, I need you to be able to go back to A and then get back to D, E, and F, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But also what I find with AI and what also hurts organizations, it's not the technical knowledge, it's the people skills. It's the interpersonal skills.
Yes.
It's do you have the emotional intelligence and the self-awareness to understand emotions, and AI doesn't help you mitigate emotions. It doesn't help you to do the empathy and the compassion and all of those things. So that's why I think it gets too far. And that's why I think people don't know how to talk to people. People don't know how to write an email. I have this phrase, I think it's mine. You guys will have to tell me this, but I tell people this: you got to know the difference between what you think, say, and write. And most people don't. Because what I think necessarily isn't going to be what I say, or it shouldn't be, or what I'm going to write. And you've got to understand that. I think that's the EQ piece. You got to know when. But if all you do is talk to, Claude or Chat GPT or whatever's out there, how do you deal with it when it's a real situation? You can't in a moment when, as an HR person, an employee brings you a situation, what do? Pick up your phone and say, hold on, let me ask Claude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's so true. And I'm looking at the next generation of HR practitioners. So I feel now, because I am in my 50s, I don't feel like my learning stopped, but I feel like I need to teach and deploy more than actually learn anymore, because I've got 35 years of working history, and now I need to impart that. And I feel quite responsible in many ways. And the reason why I do AI is simply because I don't want it to be done shitty, bad, poor for the profession that I worked within for a long time. Mm-hmm. Because HR people are not technical people. They're not usually technical people. They might have technical awareness. I mean, I know I am, right? And there will be some people, but the I don't know if you want to call it normal or average, because I don't know what normal or average is these days. But when you've got people that are real people, they're not normally sat behind laptops. They're not laptop warriors. They're out in the field with people. And so how do you balance, how I'm thinking is, how do I balance out this next generation of HR practitioners to help them to become subject matter experts, not relying on AI, using it to help them do the stuff that allows them to do more people stuff? How do we, it's a fine balance, and I'm not sure where that balance is. And I think it depends on the sector. I think it depends on the type of organization. Creative industries typically are very creative, and they're a lot more emotional. There's a lot more colorfulness that comes in, working in retail, especially at diesel days. My goodness, there was things faced that really, I have to be careful what I say, that are not just fit for HR. There was legal connotations, lawful stuff that needed to be looked at and refined. And no book would tell me, or it would actually get me in more mischief now if I consulted AI and gave it only half the story, because I only know half the story, and then can start landing so much more hot water. It's a case of, I almost feel like being a detective. It's my job to kind of get under the bonnet and see what's really happening here, and understanding. So your point that you made about understanding what, like the why and explaining the why, sometimes that's not known or not surfaced. And then I think it's my job to surface that. So I feel like the skills of HR needs to sharpen. Do you agree?
To a certain degree, I think some aspects of human resources has gotten too soft. I'm not your engagement person. I'm not going to do your party. That's not my thing. That's not my forte. Um, I think where HR people really need to sharpen their knives or sharpen their skill set is they need to know the federal regulations. When I've trained people, you ask anybody that I've trained and trust you, me, they used to get on me because I used to make them read the regulations. They're like, well, why do I got to read the regulations? They'll come back later. They all come back later. I tell this story, great story. I was working somewhere and I had this young lady and she didn't understand. And I told her, I said, let me share this with you. I was just telling her why I wanted her to do certain things. And I said, promise me this. I said, the day is going to come and everything I told you is going to be true. I want you to call me up. I don't care where I am. My
Right.
cell phone number is not going to change, but everything I'm telling you is true. You disagree with me today, but one day that light's going to come on. Fancy, a year and a half, been around you too long, fancy, using those British words. But fancy, a year and a half, 2 years later, my son comes up and he goes, Mom, let's see, let me protect the guilty and the innocent. I'll say her name is Margie. Libby, Mommy, do you know somebody named Margie? And I'm like, no, why? He goes, Mom, she found me on Facebook. I don't do Facebook. And she goes, Margie said to my son, tell your mother. She said, I used to work for her and everything that she said was true. I probably still have a screenshot of it that day.
I got the
because
chills.
yes, because it's the truth. People don't get it. But I
Yeah,
tell
yeah.
them, go off and do whatever you want to do in the world. There will come a time and place everything I
Ding.
told you was true.
Yeah.
They usually don't want to hear it right then and there. And that's what's important. You got to read the regulations. If you just know your company policy, how do you know that your company policy was correct? Just
Yep.
because somebody read it, no disrespect. I love lawyers. She used to want to be a lawyer one day, but lawyers rely on HR people to understand the practice of HR.
Yes.
They understand employment
Yes.
law, but it's the practice of it.
Yeah.
This great
true.
attorney said to me one day, he goes, Libby, it's the 3 Ps. I said, what are the 3 Ps? He goes, is it your policy or your procedure or your practice? And he goes, I want to understand that. So that's what I do now. Was that your policy? Was it your procedure? Or was it your practice? And in great organizations, all those things are in alignment. Because if your practice
Yeah.
doesn't equate what your policy is,
Right.
then you have the inconsistency. So people say, what is risk? That's your risk. Your policy tells people, this is what we do. You're supposed to do X, Y,
Well
and Z
said.
when this happens. So when your practice differs for that, you open the door for someone to say, why did you do this different for Susie or for Jim?
Yeah.
Was it because of their gender? So when you add that in, well, now you're in another space. Did you make that decision solely because of their gender? Then you're looking at Title VII. People don't think of it that
Yep.
way. That's why I tell people you need to do what it says you're going to do. And if what you're doing needs to be revised, let's revise it. And most people
Yes.
don't do that. But most of them, they couldn't answer it outside of that.
And that's a really good point to pick up with the AI. That's what I'm seeing. That there's multiple versions of one policy is now in 3 different ways. The source of truth is like which one? And then people are looking at and reading from that and creating this inconsistency. I see this day in and day out.
But most of the policies aren't written well enough for people to understand. I
that's
think
true.
the best well-written policy, the policy is going to give you your overview. It's going to give you your meat, your legal language, or whatever else you need, or your foundation. But I think the best policies tell you the manager, leader, supervisor's responsibility is X. The employee's responsibility is Y. And then that way, everybody knows what their responsibility is. You just need to know.
Yeah. It's that it comes back down to that awareness, education, consciousness around. And I know we're coming to the end of our time together. The thing that has really resonated with me is knowing the line managers, knowing enough to call in HR, and HR being that real under the bonnet of like not many. So I've been hired into role, and I remember my last chief people officer role, they wanted me to come in and change. And when I started changing, they said, no. we want change, but we want it this way, this speed, this how, told me how to do my job. And that's been the whole my whole career, right? So I'm like, screw that. I'm not working in an HR role again, because I'm going to be told you need to do this and you're going to do it this way with these resources this time. Like, you're going to put me in a box and actually strap my hands together so I can do nothing more. But I think it comes back down to the key to takeaway for me is that risk is multiple layered. It's in various parts of the business. Risk is in a bubble, in a bubble, in a bubble, in a bubble, in a bigger bubble, in a bigger bubble, institute, teams, people, policies, practices. It's everywhere.
Risk is the root cause of your problem.
Yeah.
Be it financial,
Yeah.
operational, otherwise, it's the root cause. And like you said, it's very small. And that's why most people miss it. That's what people tell me all the time. Libby, my organization's fine. We've got all that taken together. I will tell you, it's been very few organizations I've gone into and everything was good. I tell people this, and I know we're running out of time. I said, but if you have a good HR person, you should be able to drop them into your organization and they should look around and they should be able to tell you, this is right, we need to fix this, we need to fix this, we need to fix this. And they need to let you do, let you do that aspect. And if you're really good at what you do, I tell people, and what I've told them, you can look and I can tell you where your problems are because you've hired the wrong person in the wrong job. And that's why you're where you are. And most people, are surprised by that. Because I tell people, just like in any sport, all HR professionals aren't created equal.
And that's what a line that is. Not all HR professionals are created equal. I'd agree with that. Oh my God, that's a mic drop moment for me. Libby, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Zoe.
Being on the sofa, being under the spotlight. We kind of knew what we were going to talk about, but thanks for being gracious. If you've heard something today which is really resonating for you, this is what Libby does. And Elizabeth, to you, because you don't know well enough yet. This is what Libby does. Risk is multifaceted, multi-layered. You're sitting here listening to this and you want to connect with Libby. There'll be some information in the description and there'll be in the Z line. There'll be a feature on Libby coming up in the next episode, what do we call it? Publication, article. I always kind of trip myself up on that. But anyway, I really urge you to think about risk. This has opened up your mind, your heart. What is it? What does it look like for you? Because not all HR are created equal. So thanks so much for being here. Thanks, Libby, again.
Thank you, Zoe, for
Until
having
next
me.
time, over and out from Bali. See you.